I mean, how many hints did we need before realizing John Jones was done playing the UFC's game? When he sat down in that chair and looked straight into the camera, there was this weird calm in his eyes. Not frustration, not fear, just a man who had finally figured out his worth. And then he dropped the line that detonated the MMA world. I just feel like anybody would understand at this point. I'll retire the heavyweight belt if I have to. That wasn't a threat. That was a mic drop from the greatest fighter the sport has ever produced. A guy who spent nearly 2 decades terrorizing light heavyweight, moved up to heavyweight like it was nothing, and steamrolled Cyril Gane to take a belt people believed he was destined for. And now that belt, it means absolutely nothing to him. Jones wasn't angry, he wasn't begging, he was relieved. Because he's done chasing contenders who bring him risk, but no legacy. Done fighting guys who are still trying to build their names off him. He wants super fights. He wants legends. He wants the kind of moments that change the sport. And if the UFC doesn't like it, he'll walk. The entire heavyweight division felt that punch instantly. All those years grinding for a title shot, and the champion publicly declares he doesn't care about the title, that's a nuclear-sized message. And here's the scary part for the UFC. They know exactly what happens if John Jones leaves. Francis Ngannou already wrote the blueprint. Remember when Dana White laughed at him, called his exit the worst business decision ever? Yeah, until Ngannou signed with the PFL, then boxed Tyson Fury, and made more in one night than in his entire UFC career combined. More money, more freedom, more power. Suddenly, every heavyweight wearing a UFC glove started thinking, why am I still here for pennies compared to that? John Jones saying he doesn't care about the belt wasn't arrogance, it was a wake-up call. The guy holding the interim belt, Tom Aspinall, man, he's in the worst position possible. He did everything right, dominated everyone in front of him, smashed Sergey Pavlovich, became interim champ, and now he's holding a title that might not even matter. He can't unify it. He can't get Jones to acknowledge him. And every time he politely asks for a fight, he's talking into a void. So he finally snapped, respectfully, saying this division can't be held hostage forever. Either fight or vacate. But here's the brutal truth. The UFC doesn't want to let go of John Jones because he's the entire storyline. Stipe Miocic versus John Jones was supposed to be the perfect swan song. Two legends, one final war. But time keeps moving. Stipe is aging out. Jones is healing slow. And the new killers, they're stuck waiting behind a locked door. The UFC built heavyweights into attractions, stars, marketing gold. But stars don't like being controlled. And that's when things got serious. Private conversations started, managers comparing numbers, fighters looking at what Ngannou did, and realizing the UFC wasn't the only show in town anymore. They weren't just thinking about leaving, they were calculating the smartest exit. Then the leak hit the internet. A message from a supposed heavyweight group chat. We'll get our money elsewhere. Fans thought it was fake, until Jairzinho Rosenstruck and Marcin Tybura posted cryptic messages online about loyalty not paying bills. Tom Aspinall liked one. Curtis Blades tweeted that fighters are finally talking. Even if the UFC pretended not to care, they cared. Because for the first time ever, the heavyweight division, the most marketable weight class in the sport, was quietly uniting. Think about this. UFC heavyweights are underpaid, restricted from sponsorships, treated like independent contractors, without any actual independence, and blocked from boxing or anything profitable beyond the cage. And now they've realized, if Ngannou could walk away a champ and become a global superstar, why not them? During UFC 300 Fight Week in Vegas, a bunch of top 15 reportedly met up, and no, it wasn't just for dinner and laughs. That night, the idea of fighters having real bargaining power was born. They openly questioned the system. They shared revenue numbers. And once the truth started coming out about how much the UFC makes versus how little they get paid, there was no going back. The UFC tried band-aid solutions. They hyped up fights that nobody cared. WWP's The Real Belt was in limbo. Pay-per-views dipped. Fan interest dropped. Sponsors backed away. The once mighty heavyweight title turned into a ghost belt. And the man who caused all of it, John freakin' Jones, he's no longer chasing the UFC's approval. He's building something bigger than the octagon, bigger than gold plates and UFC promo packages. He's signaling to every fighter on the roster, you don't need the UFC to become a legend anymore. And that single idea tears the UFC more than anything. Because if one champion leaves, it's a problem. If an entire division leaves, it's a revolution. Jon Jones isn't just retiring from a belt. He's threatening the foundation the UFC was built on, control. The question now is simple. Will the UFC bend to Jon Jones or break trying to stop him? Because the heavyweight division is already choosing sides. And trust me, this fight is just getting started. It started as a rumor. A few screenshots floating around group chats. The messages weren't verified at first, but they felt too real to ignore. The tone was fed up, frustrated, dangerous. One message said, "Jones made his move. We can't all stay quiet. We'll get our money elsewhere." Then another, "Imagine if all of us sit out for 6 months, what card they got left." That's not just a complaint, that's a threat. And when Derek Lewis jumped in with his typical chaos energy tweeting, "It's funny till it ain't," that's when everyone knew something huge was brewing. Within 48 hours, the MMA world was on fire. Major outlets like Bloody Elbow and Sportskeeda covered the leaks. Fans started connecting dots. Fighters started liking posts they shouldn't. Meanwhile, the UFC stayed silent, which only made it scarier. Behind the curtains, panic mode quietly activated. Hunter Campbell, the UFC's chief business officer and master negotiator, in a wild plot twist nobody saw coming, the UFC is no longer the only king at the top of the MMA mountain. The Professional Fighters League, the PFL, has basically kicked down the door, walked into Dana White's house, and started taking fighters right off the dinner table. Ex-champions, undefeated monsters, fan favorites, all getting million-dollar contracts and more freedom than they ever had in the UFC. Meanwhile, Dana White, he is seriously not loving this. The man has hit full meltdown mode. Has the UFC finally met its match? Let's get into this chaos. Dana White showed the first cracks in his armor the moment Francis Ngannou walked away with heavyweight gold over his shoulder and said, "Yeah, I'm good, I'm out," before inking a blockbuster deal with PFL. That deal gave Francis total control of his career, the ability to box, and guaranteed paydays for the fighters he faced. Absolute game changer. Fans were like, finally, someone called the UFC's bluff. Dana, he went nuclear. He hit that UFC Vegas 73 press conference in May 2023 looking like he drank a gallon of espresso and regret. He mocked Francis's new direction in public. He questioned PFL's money, their business model, their entire existence. He told the world PFL was just throwing around Saudi cash and praying it works. He even laughed at Francis trying to box Anthony Joshua, calling it a gimmick fight. Then reality slapped back. Francis steps in with Tyson Fury, knocks him down, wins the world's respect, and racks up 1.2 million pay-per-view buys in his debut boxing match. Suddenly, Dana's sarcastic rant didn't age too well. Fans split into two angry armies online. One side screaming Francis just became the blueprint. The other side swearing he ducked Jon Jones. Reddit went on full wildfire mode. Every comment like a Molotov cocktail. Meanwhile, PFL's CEO Peter Murray sat back like a poker player with a royal flush. He said this wasn't just a fighter signing, it was a new era where fighters actually own their... And honestly, he wasn't lying. Then came July 2024, and another bomb dropped. Mohamed Mokaev, the undefeated flyweight wrecking machine, ranked number 6 in the world, just walks out of the UFC. That alone shocked everyone. Dana explaining it by saying the matchmakers weren't fans of his attitude only made it weirder. UFC letting a 10-0 prospect go, in a sport starving for future stars, fans smelled pettiness. Suddenly the UFC looked less like the elite career destination and more like play by our rules or get lost. And PFL snagged him smiling. Next up, Derek Brunson. 16 wins inside the UFC. Former title eliminated. Huge moments, but he talked too much about unfair matchmaking. You know what happens when you speak too loudly in the UFC. His reward? The exit door. PFL swoops in with $300K plus paydays. His reaction basically said, "I finally get what I deserve." Fighters around the world took notes. Now Thiago Santos should have been a clean victory for PFL. A dude who nearly beat Jon Jones on one leg. Legit, dangerous, experienced. That signing gave PFL credibility. Then, the drug tests hit. EPO, 10 PFL fighters suspended. Dana White couldn't grab a microphone fast enough.